Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to the Whiskey Cove. And on today's episode, we review Jim Beam's Knob Creek 10-year rye. Let's see what this is all about. Run the video. All right then folks, thank you for joining us for another new and exciting episode here on the Whiskey Cove, where we will be reviewing a brand new release from the Jim Beam Distillery, Knob Creek 10-year rye. And I am very excited about this bottle. It is that time of the year where it starts getting a little bit colder, so we might need something a little bit more spicy to warm us up. So that means we are well on our way to the traditional rye season. I'm very excited about this bottle, a 10-year age statement from the Jim Beam Distillery, 100 proof or 50% ABV. Looking at the bottle here, it has a dark, very dark, almost black green label here. It says 100 proof, 50% ABV, and then that 10 years old. And it also has that wax top, which is usually quite notorious at like being brittle and making it very hard to open. However, with this one, it didn't do too bad there. Knob Creeks are all black waxed, and not all of them are so easy to open, but this was quite easy. It is of course a cork pop, and it's a synthetic cork. So then just pouring the whiskey here in the glass. How much did I pay for this bottle? I paid $70, so $69.97 I think is what I paid for this. Very excited. And while this is breathing for just 20 seconds, if you haven't already, after this video, go into the description below where we talk about the St. Jude raffle that we're doing. All the money raised is going to St. Jude Hospital Research Center. It is $10 a ticket, and you can win some excellent prizes. All the prizes are down in the below in the description, and it's just $10 a ticket. With that being said, this is the whiskey we are reviewing today. So let's take a little look about the whiskey and how it sits in the glass here. It doesn't look too thick or too oily, which is fine. And it looks a little light for a rye, if I'm completely honest. It looks quite light in the bottle on its own up against the studio lights I have here. But just sitting in the glass, it is kind of more straw and golden color. When you think of a rye, you think of a lot more darker notes, like more mahoganies and browns. This one's a little light, and it's a 10-year age statement as well, so that's another reason why I thought it would be darker. But yeah, like I said, a lot lighter than I thought it would be. Maybe that could blend into the mash bill there a little bit. So Jim Beam traditionally make generally a more spicier product, and kind of have a little more of a nuttiness there as well. I'm not going to be specifically looking for those flavors, but there's usually flavors that I associate with Jim Beam. Let's go in for a nose here. Jim Beam Knob Creek 10-year rye. First impressions. There's a lot of aged oak on this whiskey. So ryes generally aren't aged as long as bourbons, just because the notes of aged wood kind of counter a little bit with the notes of spice. You have a lot of different spices going on there, and they don't generally come together so well. But there's big oak character on this, and it kind of comes across very approachable with that. There's not a whole lot of like spicy, harsh rye notes here. It's very creamy, maybe a little eucalyptus, that kind of fresh rye minty note that you can get, but it's not overpowering, it's just there. You can kind of feel it on the tip of your nose. A really nice toasted, bit like a cedar note there. It's quite woody forward, I guess is what I'm saying off the bat here. But there's a nice fresh sweetness there. Maybe like some pine leaf note, some pine needle notes there too. Kind of reminds me of something like a glass of whiskey I'll take up to the mountains here in Colorado. Nose in, and I get like a lot of like outdoor notes. It kind of has that sort of vibe here. And then a touch of brown sugar there. A little bit of sweetness on the back end of the nose. Let's go in for a taste here. I would say straight away, there is some sweetness there straight off the bat. Definitely a butterscotch, mapley sweetness there. It's a lot thicker on the palate than I thought it would be, considering how it looks in the glass. But sometimes what whiskey looks like in the glass is a little hard to read into. But it's a lot more rich on the palate. It does a really great job and coating the sidewalls and the tongue there with that kind of butterscotch syrupy sweetness and consistency that you have. And then as soon as that little sweetness kind of disappears, then we talk a little bit more about the rye that's coming forward in this whiskey. Some of that rye spice, that eucalyptus, almost anise or licorice there. With rye, I hate saying the word licorice because it's such a polarizing note, and you kind of have to look for a similarity of licorice here. It doesn't taste like licorice, but there's some similarities from the taste of licorice that is in this here. So if you're someone who doesn't like licorice, then that's fine. You're not going to taste it here in this. Again, a little bit of that eucalyptus there, and then it falls into a lot of the wood notes that we were talking about on the nose. Let's go in for another taste here. A note that I'm definitely getting, there is a little bit of a peanut shell note here, because you get a lot of that like cedar, like dry toasted notes off from some of the oaks there. There is a little peanut note there, but not like you're chewing a peanut, almost like you're cracking open that salty peanut case to get into the peanut, that initial bit there. And there's definitely a little bit of that in here. Not much at all, but just enough so you know you're drinking a Jim Beam product. And then towards the back end, then you're getting a little bit of tobacco spice, more of the oak tannin notes that kind of dry out the palate. You get that sweetness at the beginning, but then that sweetness falls away and it doesn't really come back into the whiskey. Towards the back end, it just is a lot more dry tobacco, spicy notes, and that tannin note there on the tongue. You know that this has plenty of age when you're drinking it. So far, I really like the approach that this whiskey gives you. It's not balanced with a bunch of sweetness. For those who might be more similar to like a bourbon where there's a lot of sweetness throughout the palate, you're not really gonna get this. You're not really gonna get that with this. You get a little bit on the front end, but then towards the mid palate and the back end, it's all big wood notes, big rye notes, and a little bit of like eucalyptus, and a little bit of like toasty marshmallow notes there as well. So, score out of 100, value for money. So with value for money, I said I pay about $70 for it. It's about 50% ABV or 100 proof. I think this is something that maybe falls in line a little bit with something maybe like the Bulleit 12 year, but I think that was 90 proof, so that was a little less proof. That was around $50–60. Will it 4 year? Yes, that's a 4-year rye whiskey, but even that sits at around $70. That's a really great rye whiskey, and a true example of that you don't really need a lot of age when it comes to rye whiskey. However, this is a 10-year product. It is 100 proof or 50% ABV, so I think this would be really great in something like a Manhattan or even a rye-forward old-fashioned. I think there's a lot of space that you can do with this in terms of different cocktails. However, if you're paying $70 for a bottle, you don't necessarily want it to be for cocktails. You might want it as a more of a sipper. So I like the price for this. I think you could maybe find better value for money out there. Think of something like the Rittenhouse Rye is a really great example of that, albeit the Rittenhouse Rye is around 4 or 5 years old. But there's nothing in there it's not really youthful at all. So you're not really kind of drinking anything, I wish this had more age. So this is kind of in a niche market, maybe the Templeton 10-year rye. I think that's around $80. So I still think this is very competitive. However, if I'm gonna reach for a rye, it's probably gonna be something a little bit cheaper, because when it comes to rye, I'm not really looking for big age with it. So for that, I'm gonna give this a C. And for score of 100, I actually really like this as a sipper. I know that there might be a lot of people out there who are bourbon drinkers, and when you pick up a rye, you want it to be a little bit more sweet, a little bit more approachable. You don't want it to be as spicy. But this is also Jim Beam as well, and Jim Beam generally has a bit more of a spicier palate. So I really like this. I like that it's more leaning towards like a true drinker's rye. You get more of the woody notes that kind of help bulk up the rye spice with this. You get a little bit of that peanut note, but for me, I'm not bothered about that. And maybe for an everyday drinker, if you like, then that might not be an issue, or maybe a flavor that you won't even pick up too. So with that being said, score out of 100, I'm gonna give this 78 out of 100, which is an excellent score. Very happy that I was able to pick this bottle up. And I think this is a bottle that we might have here down in the Whiskey Cove for some time. And I'm not just talking about this specific bottle, but I think this could be a rebuy. And maybe when the initial fanfare of this whiskey kind of falls away, We might even see the bottle drop a little bit more in price. I think a good price for this would be about $50 to $55, but in today's market, it's really hard to pinpoint a good price for any whiskey anymore. However, $70 is a C for value for money. Score of 100 is 78. Well done, Jim Beam. This was an excellent rye to go with your already excellent Knob Creeks that you do for around $55, $60, which is why I think this should be priced more towards that. So as we say on this channel, we drink through the world's whiskeys one glass at a time. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.